we have our fleece. Like I said, I work with a lot of farm fleeces. Farm fleeces usually mean a little bit of edge. So when you first get a fleece, you're going to find it generally rolled up something like this. It should have the cut end sticking out, and if the shearer has rolled it properly, it should more or less follow what a sheep looks like. I'm just gonna spread it out here. All right, so you can see from this fleece there's a fair amount of hay in it. So this is a mystery fleece. You can see it's a fairly long stapled fleece. All right, so when you have your fleece, there's a few things to look for in terms of quality. One of the things you want to take into account is obviously the amount of vegetable matter in the fleece. So if we look at this fleece, we can see it's got a fair amount of vegetable matter throughout. So all the way through the fleece, it's kind of hay is sort of a bit of everywhere. We're going to look at skirting the fleece. This one's pretty well skirted, although there are still some tags left on. Over here, you can see a pretty, fairly disgusting section over on this side. Before we get too far into this though, I did want to look at the fleece and go over the sections of it. So fleeces generally come off the animal in more or less a whole configuration. So you should be able to kind of lift up the fleece and you can see it's more or less attached together. So sections of the fleece. When you're looking at the fleece, it's going to laid out like this. It's going to follow the anatomy of the sheep to a lesser, more or less basically. And so looking at this fleece, you can see towards the back here, this is going to be the back end of our sheep. One of our indicators is going to be it's a bit dirtier. So you'll notice that the quality of the fleece is not consistent throughout. There's much longer staples back in this section here compared to up in this area we've got shorter staples. You'll also notice with this fleece there's a ton of hay throughout it. So that's going to be a consideration for when we go to process it. Some of it's going to wash out, but there's going to be a chunk that just isn't going to. So looking at a fleece like this, if the shearer has done their job correctly, it should more or less follow the shape of the animal. However, in some fleeces, it's really hard to tell which part of the fleece is which. This is going to be one of those fleeces. So we're going to have to take an educated guess as to what part of the fleece we're looking at in any given section. So we're going to ask Monty to find himself a different bed. And based on this fleece, I'm going to guess that this section here is the neck. My reason for that being that there's shorter fibers up here. This is also where the bulk of the hay is concentrated, which is fairly common. The fiber here is also shorter and it's much softer than in other places of the fleece. So that also is fairly typical of the neck or the kind of saddle area of the sheep, if you will. However, since this is at the edge, we know it's not the saddle. So I'm gonna take an educated guess and say that's the neck. So a few things to look at when you're looking at a fleece is in terms of skirting, we're gonna look for a couple of things. Any area that is absolutely saturated in hay, this is actually one of them, you're gonna probably want to skirt out. It's gonna be really difficult to get out, and especially in this section where we have this kind of fine, this finer fleece up here. That hay is almost, well, there's a bit of cotting in this fleece. That's where sheep has rubbed, and kind of rubbed the fleece together. But it's also just saturated in hay. So if we look at that, you can see the hay is just kind of throughout all of that fiber. So I would actually take that section out. Got a fair amount of fleece to work with, so, and this is farm fleece, it's not terribly precious. The other thing to look at when you're skirting a fleece is tags and anywhere the fleece is really dirty or stained. So that right here, I noticed we've got a few tags here. So you can see that that's just really, the ends of that fleece are just disgusting. So we're gonna skirt that out as well. And then if there's any additional kind of disgusting sections, especially if it's like this part right here. So again, you can see that's gross. So we're just gonna get rid of that. And we're gonna regret our decision not to wear gloves for this. All right, another thing to look out for is second cuts. So you can see in this section right here, these little fluffs, that's a second cut. And that's basically just where a shearer went through and didn't quite shear close enough to the skin of the sheep and had to do a second pass. That leaves these little tiny little pieces through your fleece. If you can at this point, I would just do your best to kind of pick them out. And we can toss those as well. That's going to save you trouble in the long run, because those second cuts will get caught in your processing. So we're just going to work our way through this fleece. I'm going to start dividing it up, and then we're going to look at how we wash a fleece. Another thing to note about fleeces is looking at the quality of your fleece, and there's a few things to watch out for there. There's something that I do with absolutely every single fleece I buy, and it's called the ping test. So we're going to see if we can get this to work. So grab a lock of your fleece. It doesn't have to be quite that big. Like a good lock of the fleece. And what you're going to do is you're going to take it up next to your ear and you're going to do the ping test. So you're going to pull the lock like that. So it kind of bounces a little bit. And you're going to listen for anything that sounds crackly. So this fleece is very sound. There's no crackle sound to it. If there's a bit of a crackle, that means there's a break in your fleece, which means that there is a spot in the lock that is structurally weaker than the rest of the fiber. That can also cause you problems in processing, because if you have your locks breaking while you're trying to comb or card, then you're going to have uneven staple lengths throughout. That can also cause neps in your yarn. It can cause little neps when you're trying to spin. So it's a good thing to check about your fleece, preferably before you buy it, just to know that your fleece is sound and ready to work with. Okay, so here we go. So when I wash my fleeces, I use buckets, just like these guys here. They're reused or repurposed ice cream buckets that were going to be recycled or thrown out, so we're giving them a new purpose here. So I'm going to sort sections of my fleece into these buckets so that they are ready for washing.